Throughout history, some of the most profound minds have found themselves isolated, not because they were wrong, but because they saw the world differently, perceiving truths that others either ignored or feared. The deeper you think, the more you notice the hidden contradictions, the unspoken assumptions, and the flaws in the systems that most accept without question. The more you understand, the more you realize how few people truly want to listen, because true understanding often demands change, and change is unsettling. It's not just in your head. Society has always resisted those who think too deeply, not because their insights lack value, but because their presence alone unsettles the comfortable illusions most people cling to. Illusions about morality, power, purpose, and reality itself. From Socrates, who was condemned for corrupting the youth with questions, to Galileo, who faced the wrath of the church for proving the earth was not the center of the universe. From Nietzsche, whose radical ideas on morality were misunderstood and rejected, to Tesla, whose visionary inventions were dismissed and suppressed. History is filled with brilliant minds cast aside, not for being fools, but for seeing what others refuse to face. But why does this happen? Why do those who question, analyze, and seek truth so often find themselves on the outskirts of society, viewed as threats rather than guides? The answer lies deep within human psychology. Imagine standing next to someone who is physically stronger than you. You might admire their strength, even aspire to build your own, because physical power is tangible. It can be measured, trained, and improved with effort. If you meet someone who is wealthy, you may envy them, but you don't necessarily feel personally threatened, because wealth is external. It can be gained, lost, or inherited. Intelligence, however, triggers something far more complex. When someone encounters a mind that surpasses their own, they don't just see new ideas, they see their own limitations reflected back at them, often in ways they cannot easily change. And people do not forgive that easily. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. The discomfort people feel when confronted with someone whose intellect forces them to question their own understanding of the world. Unlike physical strength or wealth, intelligence is deeply tied to identity. Our thoughts, our beliefs, our perception of reality, these define who we are, shaping not just how we navigate life, but how we see ourselves within it. When a deep thinker introduces ideas that shake these foundations, it doesn't just challenge opinions, it challenges the very sense of self. It forces an internal confrontation. Am I wrong? Have I been misled? Is everything I believe flawed? These are unsettling questions, and rather than face them, most people instinctively retreat. Instead of curiosity, they react with resistance. Instead of engagement, they dismiss, avoid, or even attack, because protecting one's self-image often feels more urgent than seeking the truth. This is why deep thinkers have always been met with hostility. It's not arrogance or superiority that isolates them. It's the simple fact that their presence alone can feel like an unspoken accusation, a silent reminder of uncomfortable truths. Their words, their insights, and even their mere existence force others to confront realities they'd rather ignore. Realities about the flaws in their beliefs, the contradictions in their reasoning, or the illusions they've built their lives around. And when people feel exposed in this way, their first instinct is not to listen, but to defend. History has proven this time and time again. The world doesn't reject intelligence itself. It rejects what intelligence reveals. The deeper the truth, the more unsettling it becomes. Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers, argued that intelligence is not a blessing, but a burden. He believed that the more clearly someone sees reality, the more difficult it becomes for them to connect with others. To see the world as it truly is, to recognize the inherent absurdities, injustices, and contradictions, can be isolating because most people do not want to see it. They prefer comforting illusions, and society does not reward those who dismantle them. It rewards those who reinforce them. This is why confidence is often valued more than intelligence in social settings. People are drawn to those who speak with certainty, even if their ideas are shallow. The human mind craves stability, and confidence provides that, regardless of whether the beliefs behind it are well-founded. It explains why charismatic but simplistic thinkers gain influence while deep thinkers are pushed aside. Populist leaders, motivational speakers, viral influencers, they thrive not because they offer deep wisdom, but because they tell people what they want to hear. They affirm biases, simplify complex issues, and provide easy answers to difficult questions. Meanwhile, those who introduce difficult truths that require self-reflection, effort, or discomfort, find themselves ignored, misunderstood, or silenced. Because in the end, society does not fear intelligence itself. It fears the change that intelligence demands. But why does intelligence provoke such discomfort? The answer lies in how our brains have evolved. Neuroscientific research shows that when people feel intellectually inferior, their amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear and threats, becomes highly active. In other words, deep thinking doesn't just make people uncomfortable, it actually triggers the same fear response as a physical threat. The brain perceives a challenge to one's intellect as a potential attack on one's status, identity, and sense of competence. This is why debates, even when logical, often escalate into emotional conflicts, because the subconscious mind treats a loss in intellectual dominance as a form of social defeat. For most of human history, survival depended not on being the smartest, but on being accepted by the group. Tribal societies thrived on unity, where conformity meant security. Being outcast could mean death. This is why our brains are wired for social acceptance over intellectual pursuit. The need to belong is deeply ingrained, and anything that threatens group cohesion, such as challenging commonly held beliefs, triggers defensive reactions. A highly intelligent person entering a group setting disrupts that balance. Their presence alone can challenge social norms, expose logical inconsistencies, and make others feel uncertain about their own beliefs. This creates cognitive dissonance, a psychological state of discomfort that people instinctively try to resolve, often by dismissing or ridiculing the source of that discomfort rather than engaging with the ideas presented. This is why deep thinkers often find genuine conversations in private but struggle in larger groups. Studies from Stanford University confirm this effect. Intelligent individuals are less likely to be rejected in one-on-one interactions, where discussions feel less threatening and personal connections can form. However, in group settings, the fear response intensifies. The more people present, the stronger the pressure to conform, and the greater the likelihood that those who challenge the group's assumptions will be met with resistance. It's not just intelligence that threatens people, it's how intelligence affects social hierarchy. When people feel outshined, they instinctively try to undermine, dismiss, or exclude the source of their discomfort, whether through subtle social rejection, outright hostility, or even vilification. History has shown that societies often push away those who think too deeply, not because they lack value, but because their presence alone forces people to confront what they would rather ignore. Several cognitive biases further explain why intelligence is so often with resistance. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that people with lower ability tend to overestimate their competence, while those with higher intelligence are more likely to doubt themselves. This creates friction, as those who know little often believe they know more than they do, leading them to dismiss deeper thinkers. The status quo bias means that people naturally resist change, preferring familiar ideas even when they are flawed. Intelligence disrupts this by introducing new perspectives, which can feel unsettling. The backfire effect causes people to double down on their existing beliefs when confronted with contradictory information, making them even more resistant to new ideas. In the digital age, these biases are amplified. Social media platforms prioritize engagement over depth, favoring viral content that is simple, emotionally charged, and easy to digest. Complex, nuanced discussions struggle to gain traction. As a result, society increasingly values entertainment over enlightenment, making it even harder for deep thinkers to find a place in mainstream discourse. This rejection of deep thinking doesn't just occur online, it starts in the institutions that shape our minds. Schools claim to value intelligence, but in reality they reward obedience. Students who memorize and repeat information are praised, while those who question or challenge authority are seen as problematic. Workplaces prioritize those who conform over those who innovate. In politics, leaders who make logical but unpopular statements often lose to those who simply tell people what they want to hear. Society does not celebrate intelligence when it challenges the norm, it only embraces it in hindsight, once it is no longer a threat. The greatest minds in history were not celebrated during their lifetimes. They were ridiculed, punished, or ignored. Socrates was executed, Galileo was imprisoned, Nietzsche was dismissed as mad, Tesla died in obscurity, And Alan Turing, despite his groundbreaking work, was persecuted and driven to suicide. The pattern is undeniable. Society does not embrace intelligence until it becomes safe to do so. So what does this mean for deep thinkers today? If you have ever felt misunderstood for your thoughts, you aren't alone. The world has never made space for those who think ahead of their time. It has only tolerated them once the world finally catches up. But this does not mean you are doomed to isolation. It means you must navigate society with awareness. Not everyone is ready for deep conversations, and not every setting is meant for profound discussions. Choose your audience wisely. Seek out like-minded individuals who value depth over distraction. Learn to communicate your insights in a way that resonates rather than overwhelms. The greatest thinkers in history found ways to make their ideas accessible without diluting their depth. Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." There is power in clarity. Schopenhauer also wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." If you see the world differently, you will always make some people uncomfortable. But that does not mean you should stop thinking deeply. The world may resist deep thinkers, but it is deep thinkers who push humanity forward. Every major shift in history, every breakthrough in philosophy, science, and art began with someone who refused to accept the limits of conventional thought. So if you have ever felt alone in your thoughts, know this: you are not broken. You are simply seeing the world for what it really is. The struggle of the deep thinker is not a flaw, it is a sign of clarity. And while society may not always embrace those who challenge its illusions, history proves that they are the ones who shape the future. Keep questioning, keep exploring, because the world needs minds willing to see beyond the obvious.